Hey, it's Rain. Welcome. In this video, I will be showing you how I make my PON, how I use it, and I will also explain to you why. This video was inspired by one of my community members who was interested in using PON for herself. If you're interested in joining my community, you can head over to Cozy Plants at SKOOL. It is free and private. Before I start this video, I should make sure that you understand that I am not an expert. I do have over 120 houseplants, but I only started collecting and taking care of plants about a year ago. I have been making and using my own PON for several months now, and I have found it to be a good substrate for my Hoyas and for my propagations. I also have a couple of alocasias in PON, and they've been doing pretty good. So what is PON? Well, it's an alternative to using soil. It is soil-less, and usually it is made up of 3 different types of rocks. And these rocks come from volcanic activity. The 3 different types of rocks are pumice, lava rock, and zeolite. I have purchased these 2 bags from Amazon. I will try to find the links and put them down in the description below for you if you want to use what I'm using. I don't yet have affiliate links, but I may in the future, and when I do, I will certainly let you know down in the description below. The pumice I got from a local plant nursery. I'm sure you could find this also on Amazon, and if I can find a link that is similar to what I have here, I will also put that down below. Now I will explain a little bit of why I prefer to use PON over soil in certain instances. Firstly, for me, it's personal preference as far as the aesthetics of it. I think that PON is much more beautiful than soil. I have chosen black lava rock over the red lava rock, and the zeolite is green. The pumice is kind of a taupey tan color, and the mix of these together reminds me of a serene Japanese rock garden. I just find it to be cleaner than soil, and it is actually easier for me to water. I can tell when the pond starts to dry out visually just by looking at it, and instantly I know when I need to water it and when I don't. And that is definitely not the case for me with soil. It is much more difficult for me to figure out if my plants that are in soil need to be watered or not. Another reason why I like PON over soil is that PON does not degrade like soil does over time. So you don't have to repot your plants because the soil has gone bad. So that's less maintenance, which I like. Another reason is that PON is resistant to certain pests. It can help to deter gnats from trying to nest in the PON. So that is a huge plus for me. So although I do love PON and I am trying to switch many of my plants from soil into PON, I would not recommend PON for every single houseplant. If you are adventurous like I am and you want to try PON with some of your plants, I'm all for it. And you might find that some of your plants prefer PON over soil. I will explain the different properties of each of these different rocks, which makes me think that PON can really help to boost the overall health of your plant. I will do that later on in the video as I start to mix these together. For the rest of this video, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process of how I put my PON together and how I use it. The first step we need to take is to determine the ratio of the rocks that we put into the mix. You can do 2 parts pumice, 1 part lava rock, and 1 part zeolite. So that's 2-1-1. You can also do 2 parts pumice, 2 parts lava rock, and 1 part zeolite. So that would be 2-2-1. These are not the only ratios that would be correct. I have experimented with different ratios, and the one I'm going to try today is the 2-2-1. If you make your own PON, I would love to hear what your favorite ratio is. The next step in the process is to wash the rocks. So I'm going to go ahead and take you outside as I do that. For our next step, you will need some type of measuring cup and a fine mesh sieve. I think this is about 1.5 millimeters. And a tray so that you can mix all your PON. You will also need running water. Since I'm doing the 2-to-1 ratio, I am going to measure out 4 cups of pumice and I'm going to rinse it as well as I can. I'm looking at the water, trying to get it as clear as I can. And while I'm doing this, I would like to explain the benefits of using pumice. Pumice is a very porous material, so it holds on to water while allowing for aeration. So this is something I never knew before I started my plant journey. The roots of a plant actually need oxygen. Something else I didn't know is that plants can suffer from root rot if the soil or whatever substrate it's in gets waterlogged, which means there's too much water and not enough oxygen. So the pores within the pumice help to hold oxygen and prevent root rot. Pumice is often compared to perlite, but pumice actually holds more water than perlite does. Perlite dries out extremely fast. Pumice holds water better and it will last longer. An interesting scientific fact about pumice I did not know is that it has high CEC, which is short for cation exchange capacity. Perlite, on the other hand, has close to 0 CEC. So why is that important? Because of this property, pumice acts like a magnet for plant nutrients, and it holds on to the nutrients for the plant so that the roots can draw from it whenever it needs. Pumice also has great capillary action, so it's able to draw moisture from the bottom of the pot towards the top, which helps to provide more consistent moisture for the root system. Since these stones are inorganic materials, they do not have a pH themselves, so the pH would not change over time like soil does when it gets old. Soil can have a tendency to become more and more acidic over time, which can affect your plants negatively. Pumice is also resistant to certain pests and fungi. So now I will be rinsing the lava rock, and I'll be taking 4 cups of this. Here are some interesting facts about why lava rock is used in PON. So the properties are actually very similar to pumice as far as aeration and water and nutrient retention, but the lava rock has pores that are a little bit larger. They are called macropores, whereas the pores in the pumice are called micropores. So the lava rock has larger air pockets, which can allow for more oxygen circulation around the roots. An interesting scientific fact about lava rock is that the rough textured surface and the many pores allows for beneficial bacteria to colonize. They help to break down organic waste and cycle the nutrients for the plant, and that's a good thing. Lava rock is also gnat resistant. We all hate those fungus gnats. Another very interesting fact about lava rock is that it is a long-term food source for plants. The lava rock can slowly break down over time and release micronutrients that the plants can use, such as iron, magnesium, and calcium. Now I will be rinsing out the zeolite, and I will only be taking 2 cups of this. The properties of zeolite are also very similar to pumice and lava rock as far as aeration and nutrient and water retention, but the zeolite goes a little bit further in that it acts as a pH buffer. So if the water that you are feeding your plants is not quite the right pH, the zeolite may be able to help to buffer that. The zeolite also goes further with absorbing excess nutrients and even absorbing pollutants, toxins, and heavy metals that can harm the plant. And as a bonus, that property can also help prevent algae growth since it starves the algae of its food source. I don't know about you, but all of this convinces me that PON is great for my plants. And now for the fun parts, I get to mix it all up, and oops, I had a spill. Alrighty, so I've got my PON all rinsed off and mixed together, and now I'm ready to pot up one of my plants. So this is a newer plant. This is my Hoya finlaysonii, and I just got this the other day. It was a cutting that I bought from a neighbor, and it is nicely rooted. So I think this is ready to go in some PON, and I'm going to show you the close-up as I do this. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I have a pot that has drainage holes. I like to make sure that in case I overwater my plant, I can easily just drain it out, because that has happened to me in the past. I have accidentally put too much water into my pots that didn't have drainage holes, and it was very difficult for me to get it out. And that's just a little bit annoying. Also, I like the idea of the water flushing through the pond and cleaning it out, because I think that if you have a closed container, buildup will start to happen at the bottom of the pot over time. And I feel like that could maybe negatively affect the plant. And I just don't want to take that chance. So I like having drainage holes. So I just use my reamer to poke some holes in this plastic. And I am trying to get away from using plastic. I am still in the process of getting my pottery studio put together. I'm trying to figure out how to use my kiln so that I can harden my clay into permanent ceramic pieces. So that's in the works. But for right now, I'm reusing plastic for my plants. All right, the first thing I'm going to do now is put a thin layer of PON at the bottom. And I'm going to check how far the roots go down into the cup. And so I'll just fill up the pond until it reaches the bottom of the roots. And I do realize that this is probably very self-explanatory, but I just remember being a very novice beginner and not having any knowledge of plants. I had zero green thumb, and I was trying to find videos to learn how to do this for myself. And I just found a lot of videos were lacking some information, and I just don't want to assume anything. I want to give as much information as I can in my videos, and hopefully I don't leave anything out, but this is how I do it. And I'm not saying that my way of doing it is the correct way or the only way. This is just the way that I've learned to do it, and this is what has been working for me. So I can see now the roots are touching the pond, and now I'm just going to fill the pond around the roots. And so I do remember at the beginning of my journey when I first started using PON, I would try putting the plant in with the PON and I would have to dump it out and start over. So that's why I'm trying to explain this in detail right now, because I want to save you time and heartache. So I pretty much have the plant centered in my pot the way I want. So I'll continue to fill in. And because this was a water propagation, I am going to fill the pond, my cup, all the way to the top of the roots so that the water roots won't go into shock. And then I will gradually let the water line get lower and lower after about 2 weeks. And that way the plant has time to acclimate to the pond and grow roots that are able to capture the moisture from the pond. So I'll just tap it down. It's looking good. Wow, this is an amazing Hoya. That leaf is incredible. So I'm just gonna fill it all the way up to the top of that last root. And I always have so much fun shoveling PON. All right. That looks good to me. Very nice. So what I need now is a cache pot. And I think that this original cup that it was in will work just fine for that. So I'll just place it like so. And I love how there's a little bit of space down here at the bottom. So the outer cup is slightly smaller than the inner cup, and that just happened by accident. And I encourage you to find an outer pot or some type of cache that has airflow. So this is not going to have much airflow, but I'm going to do my best to open it up and get some air in here every once in a while. I just currently don't have a larger cover pot or outer cache pot right now. So if this was not a water propagation, what I would do as far as like the level of the water, so this is my Super Thrive solution that I'm using right now. So I would get all of the pond wet, and I accidentally put too much. So that's why I like having drainage holes. So let me go dump some of this out. So I dumped all of it out because I could see that I didn't do an excellent job of rinsing the pond. There was some sediment down at the bottom, so I just dumped it all out. But I'll go ahead and show you where I put the water line. So I like to just cover the bottom part of the pond, like so. So the water line is about here. I could go a little higher because the roots are way up here. So I would go just under the roots with the water line every time I water it. So once the plant drinks up all of the water, this will get empty at the bottom and you will start to see the pond dry up on the surface. And you can definitely tell the difference between wet pond and dry. So here is a close-up of the difference between wet pond and dry pond. The dry pond is much lighter in color and looks chalkier, and the wet pond is shinier and darker. And the point at which you re-water your plant is going to differ depending on the type of plant it is. I let my Hoyas dry out, but for something like an alocasia, you'd probably want to keep the pond moist. So just do some research on your plant and experiment a little bit and have fun with it. So this for me is a $3 plant. I have no qualms putting this straight into pond. And plus I know that Hoyas do really well in pond. Since this was a water propagation, I'm going to go ahead and fill this up all the way until it covers all of the roots. And I'm going to keep it at this level for about 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I'll slowly let the water level be lower and lower over time until I get to this point that I showed you at first. And then every time I water, I would just water up to about there, covering just the bottom of the pond. So this is not in a self-watering system. You could make it self-watering. And I did do that with this Hoya. So I put a cotton wick inside of the pot, and then I keep a reservoir of the water at the bottom. And then the wick helps to keep the pond moist longer over time. So this helps save time for me, so I'm not constantly watering all of my plants. And I can see that this needs to be watered. The pond is, I think, completely almost dry. I can tell by squeezing the pot, it's a plastic pot, that there's still a little bit of moisture in the pond, but it is very dry on the top. And the cache is definitely completely dry. But I can feel that the leaves are kind of soft, so I'm going to go ahead and water it. And I almost forgot to mention, when I put the cotton wick inside, I made sure that the cotton wick came up to here in the inner pot, about midway. So that way it wicks the moisture up into the mid part of the pot. I have seen some people just leave the wick flat all the way at the bottom, and I suppose that would help. The pond does have wicking properties, but I just like having the wick up at the middle. So it's up to you what you decide to do. So I've just watered this guy. He's nice and happy now. I also have this Hoya in pond, but it is not in a self-watering system. And the pot is very small and it's in a terracotta dish. So this one dries out faster. I find myself having to water this more, and the leaves are pretty wrinkly right now. So I am going to give this a drink right now, and eventually in the future, I would like to have all of my Hoyas in self-watering pots with the pond. That's just what I prefer because I do live in a desert and the air here is a little bit drier. So the self-watering just helps me out. If you live in a place that is more humid, you may not need to do this. As far as what to put in the water that you give to your plants in pond, because there is no fertilizer in the pond that I've made, if you purchase pond from Lechuza or another company, I think they put slow release fertilizer in their pond. So you may not need to add anything to the water. I actually don't have experience with that, so you'll have to do research on your own for that. But since my pond does not have the slow release fertilizer, I use Super Thrive Foliage Pro. This is a liquid plant food that is used for hydroponics. I'm doing more of a semi-hydroponics, not a full-on hydroponic system. So the water is not flowing. And so you want to read the instructions on here and use the amount that they're saying for non-recirculating systems. So I pre-mix my gallons. And also recently I just started using Stress Coat because we have extremely hard water out here. And these are the only two things that I put in the water that I give to my plants that are in pond. And out here in Vegas, it doesn't really get too cold in the winter. So I don't plan on diluting my solution. So if you're in a place where it gets extremely cold and maybe your plants go dormant, you might want to dilute the solution or maybe not use it at all until growing season comes back. Another thing I really love about pond is that you can reuse it over and over. So I have had some rehab plants that I tried to save in pond that didn't make it. And when I decide to reuse pond like that, I sterilize it. And I got a dedicated pot just for that. So I'll place my pond in here, I'll boil it in some water for at least 10 minutes, and then it's ready to reuse. And that's definitely not something you can do with soil. So here is an example of one of my alocasias that I use in pond. This is my alocasia mellow, and I keep it in a cache, and I fill up from the top to get all the pond moist until the cache fills up. That's about 1/4 of an inch maybe. And then once the cache completely dries out, I will refill it again. So I try not to let the pond get too dry. As soon as I see this cache get dry, usually by then the top rocks will be dry, but I can feel that the inside ones are moist. I will give it another drink. And this method seems to be working so far. There is a new growth point right there. And these big healthy leaves came out while they were living in this pond. I hope this video has been helpful to you if you are new to PON. And if you already use PON in your collection and you watch this video, I would love to hear your experience with PON. Let me know if I have missed anything or if you have any extra tips. So now I'm going to give you a list of all of the products that I use to make my PON. So you will need the 3 different rocks. We have pumice, black lava rock, or you could use red if you like, and zeolite. You will need some type of measuring cup and a fine mesh sieve. I think this is about 1.5 millimeters, and a tray so that you can mix all your PON. And you will need some type of food source for your plants. I use Super Thrive, but there are other products out there. And you can use Stress Coat or something similar if you have hard water. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and enjoy your plants.